Episode 270. Capture Her. Making elixirs. I'll ask for you. Kathy nodded at Susan and said. Susan smiled pleasantly and wanted to give Kathy something as appreciation. Then she remembered that Kathy's master was a soul formation realm cultivator, and she probably didn't need anything from her. It was the first time Kathy saw Susan smile, and it was too beautiful. Even though she was a girl, she was stunned when she saw Susan's beauty. Jacob also asked for me to see if that North Atlantic's elixir master is willing to help out or not. If he's willing to help out, I can give him a lot of compensation, Susan said to Jacob again. Jacob thought, that kid is Thomas's disciple, and his background is not inferior to Kathy's. The entire North Atlantic Dragon Palace promised him a great reward, and it was barely enough for him to save Kenneth last time. Since making the youth pills was a simple task, the little master probably wouldn't help. Even though he thought so, Jacob still didn't want to disappoint Susan. Okay, I will ask if I get a chance to meet him. I will keep the materials. Whoever could find a way to make elixir can come and get them, Susan said. Perhaps because of the good news of potentially getting the youth pills, Susan's complexion turned rosy. Susan, drink some medicine. Elder Kayla walked into the room. Seeing that Susan's condition was stable, Kathy was slightly relieved. I won't disturb your rest anymore. I wanted to buy some supplements for you originally, but there wasn't good timing. Thank you for thinking of me. Susan sat up slowly and held on to the porcelain bowl that contained the black liquid medicine. The more Kathy looked at Susan, the prettier she seemed. Susan looked like a goddess that came out of a painting, especially when wearing a long dress. Jacob and Kathy walked out of the bedroom, and Elder Frank and 4 bodyguards, who had been waiting for a long time, came up to them immediately. Please cover your eyes, young lady. Elder Frank took out a black cloth. Okay. Kathy took over the black cloth from Elder Frank's hand and covered her eyes. She was a quiet person, but it didn't mean that she was insensitive. She could feel the alertness from Elder Frank and the 4 bodyguards' eyes. This place wasn't where she should be. There would be a small structure in 5 steps and a pavilion in 10 steps, and the corridors were curved just like ribbons. She slowly raised her hand and tried to grab Jacob's arm. Jacob held onto her hand, which was slightly sweaty from being nervous, and led her out of the palace. Closing her eyes and handing herself to another person required complete trust. There were too many uncertainties and potential dangers in front of them. However, Kathy felt relieved when Jacob led the way. Even though she couldn't see anything, as long as Jacob was there to guide her, she would get out of any situation. Walking out of the main entrance of the Dragon Palace, Jacob took out the water-repellent bead. He continued and walked to the beach. After they got inside the car, Elder Frank drove Kathy and Jacob back to the city. Master Jacob, these were the Queen's orders. Pardon me for the intrusion. Elder Frank came to Jacob's side of the car door and slightly bowed when they returned to the city. No worries. Jacob smiled at him. The Dragon Palace was a secret place. It was indeed a bit abrupt for Jacob to take Kathy there. Please find me if you need anything else. Elder Frank got back in his black Mercedes-Benz and drove away. There's a bus that I can take. I'll get off here. Kathy opened the car door and waved at Jacob. Rest up over the weekend. She didn't even ask about the palace. Since those people didn't want her to know, she didn't want to give Jacob a hard time and suppressed her unnecessary curiosity. You too. Rest up well. Jacob looked at her and couldn't say anything else. Kathy smiled at him. Then she saw the bus coming their way, so she took her pass out and quickly got onto the bus. Jacob drove away as he exhaled. He headed toward his home beside the beach. At the same time, in Sophie's house, the old master walked toward the door, turned around, and raised her hand. "That'll be everything. Farewell." "Take care." Helen nodded gently. A ray of five-colored godly light beam appeared under the old woman's feet, and she vanished instantly. Helen stood at the doorway and paused for 2 seconds before turning around and closing the door gently. Jacob returned to his home. As he drove the car back to the garage of the house, Jacob heard laughter inside. Could it be that Soph's family is here for a visit? Jacob parked his car inside the garage and rushed into the house. On the couch in the living room, Grandma was surrounded by Jade on the left and Julia on the right. They were chatting happily. "Master!" Seeing that Jacob had come back, Jade and Julia stood up at the same time and greeted Jacob. "When did you guys come?" Jacob looked at them with surprise. "They came at noon and kept me company for the whole afternoon," Grandma said pleasantly. "Oh, I see." Jacob went to the Dragon Palace today, and it was late when he came home. Jade and Julia were considerate and came all the way here to accompany his grandma. "Not only this time. When I was away, they came to visit me every week. The people there thought that they are my granddaughters." Grandma held the sisters by their arms and made them sit down again on the couch. Jade and Julia were pretty and really smart. Most importantly, they were kind-hearted and knew how to please elders. Therefore, Jacob's grandma was very fond of them. She still didn't understand why they called her grandson Master, but had gotten used to it by now. When Grandma was talking, Jade and Julia switched their positions. They leaned against the couch and took turns massaging Grandma's shoulders. The tiny streaks of nature essence followed through their meridians into Grandma's body and made her feel refreshed. "Your massage techniques are extremely good. You guys take such good care of me, but I don't have anything to repay you with." Even though it was comfortable for her, Grandma still held their arms to stop them. "Grandma, you are the reincarnation of the god of luck, and you ought to enjoy life and be happy," Jade said truthfully and sweetly. "You two girls keep on flattering me." Grandma took their hands softly in hers. During this period, the sisters got familiar with Grandma. Grandma treated them as her own children, and they also took care of her attentively. In contrast, Jacob was ignored on the side. "Jacob, why are you blanking out? Go make dinner." Suddenly, Grandma looked up and urged Jacob. "Oh, okay." Jacob walked toward the kitchen and suddenly thought, "Wait a minute, how did my status become the lowest all of a sudden?" Jade and Julia were talking and laughing with Grandma in the living room. Jacob walked into the kitchen, grabbed all sorts of ingredients from the refrigerator, pondered for a while about what dishes to make, and got busy. The sea was right beside the house, and the North Atlantic Dragon Palace was hidden there. Jacob's house was close to the Dragon Palace. Jacob thought of these random things while cooking. Jade and Julia came to the smoky kitchen and went behind Jacob's back. "Master!" Jacob, who was cooking, jumped. He turned around to look at them and saw them smirking at him. "Hey, don't scare me." Jacob glared at them. They walked to his side. "We'll help, Master." "Do you know how to cook?" Jacob looked at them suspiciously. They shook their heads. "No." Jacob sighed. They said in unison, "We can learn how to cook from you, Master." Jacob's cooking skill was very limited. All he could do was make food that was edible and average in taste. His cooking skill couldn't be comparable to Helen's or Kathy's. Seeing Jacob not replying, they stood on the sides and watched him. "I'll teach you two how to make this soup." Jacob turned around and looked at them. The two girls widened their eyes joyfully. Seeing their pure and silly expressions, Jacob couldn't stifle his laughter. "Turn to medium heat and put in the meat first." Jade went up and placed the meat slices that Jacob cut into the pot. "Then put vegetables in and add the seasoning and salt," Jacob instructed. Julia dropped the vegetables in clumsily. Both of them were curious about everything and were quick learners. "For salt, only put a little bit. Don't put too much." Seeing Julia tilt the salt container, Jacob hurriedly held on to her palm. Julia nodded obediently. Under Jacob's instruction, she poured out a bit of salt. "You can't add that. It's pepper powder." Seeing that Jade was about to dump the pepper powder in, Jacob reached out and grabbed Jade's hand. Jade put the pepper bottle down and frowned. Jacob kept instructing them and supervised all the spices they put into the soup. "Master, we will sleep over tonight." Jade looked at Jacob after a while and said, "As long as you guys don't cause any troubles, you can stay wherever you want." Jacob tapped Jade's forehand with his finger. He didn't know how to act as a master, and that was why Jade and Julia became more and more mischievous. "How do I take the poached fish out?" Julia asked. "Use this, and be careful of the hot water." Jacob handed her a flat spatula and reminded her. He taught her how to check if the fish was done. Standing outside of the glass door of the kitchen, Grandma looked inside with a smile and strolled back to the living room. Lying on the couch leisurely, Grandma turned on the television and chose the channel. She thought proudly, "Who said Jacob couldn't talk to girls?" After 10 minutes, Jacob brought out the finished dishes from the kitchen, with the assistance of the relaxed and happy Jade and the nervous and cautious Julia. His cooking still wasn't as great as Helen's, but as long as he spent time and cooked patiently, the taste wouldn't be too bad. Grandma was extremely pleased to be eating the meal that her grandson had cooked for her. The atmosphere was lively, and in their usually silent home, Grandma really liked that. Even though Jade and Julia didn't know how to cook, they were very good at serving Grandma during the meal. As if Grandma's mind was filled with honey, she felt like everything she ate was delicious and sweet. The days when she was lonely seemed to be gone once and for all. While they were eating happily at the house, Henry, who still had a light scar on his neck, led the 16 elders of the South Atlantic and flew toward the house by the beach. "Capture that old woman! I'll see what he dares to do next!" Henry summoned his golden spear and yelled as he clenched his teeth.